This is the story of James Brown versus Joe Tex. The rivalry between James Brown and Joe Tex is one of the most legendary and dramatic feuds in the history of soul music. Both men were pioneers of rhythm and blues, carving out their own paths in the 1960s and 70s, but their relationship was anything but harmonious. What began as competition for musical dominance soon spilled into personal conflicts, fueled by battles over stolen stage moves, love triangles, and public confrontations. It's said that the feud between Joe Tex and James Brown started sometime in the mid-50s. Both artists were signed to King Records, and they both had similar styles, so similar that Joe Tex accused James Brown of stealing some of his moves, but James Brown would say it was the other way around. So one night during a dance at a juke joint, James Brown challenged Joe Tex to a battle, and this was said to have offended Joe. In 1960, Joe left King Records and recorded a few songs on Anna Records, which was owned by Berry Gordy's sister, Anna Gordy. One of those songs was a song called Baby You're Right. That same year, James Brown started dating a singer by the name of B. Ford, who'd been married to Joe Tex, but they divorced in 1959. James and B released a duet called You've Got the Power, in which B said, "I'm leaving you, darling, and I won't be back. I found something better somewhere down the track." And in 1961, James released his version of Baby You're Right, with changed lyrics and musical composition, earning him co-songwriting credits along with Joe Tex. Soon after this, James sent Joe a letter telling him that he could have B back if he wanted her because he was done with her. This would lead to Joe releasing a song entitled You Keep Her in 1962. In the song, he said, "James, I got your letter. It came to me today. You said I could have my baby back, but I don't want her that way, so you keep her. You keep her because, man, she belongs to you." Things would escalate in July of 1963 on the night of James Brown's homecoming concert in Macon, Georgia. The show took place at the City Auditorium with Joe Tex as an opening act and James as the headliner. During Joe's performance, he mimicked James Brown's cape routine. It's said that he brought out a raggedy blanket, put it on his back, and fell to his knees. He then grabbed his back and entangled himself in the blanket and started fighting to get out of it while singing, "Please, please, please, get me out of this cape." After Joe's set, he left and went to a local juke joint called Club 15, where Otis Redding and the Pine Toppers were performing. Furious about what Joe had done, James immediately went to the club following his show and pulled out 2 shotguns and began firing. Newton Collier, who played with the Pine Toppers, said Joe was running back behind the trees and bushes. Singer Wayne Cochran, who was also there that night, said, "James and somebody else was in there shooting across the room at each other and reloading. Didn't neither one of them hit the other. James ran outside and I saw his tour bus pull out of the parking lot with him behind the wheel." And Johnny Jenkins of the Pine Toppers said, 7 people got shot. They were reloading and coming back in. Me and Otis, we were hiding behind a piano. A guy went around later, and I think he gave each one of the injured $100 apiece not to carry it no further. And that just quieted it down. After this, James would avoid Joe, but the rivalry continued. In 1967, Joe Tex released the song Skinny Legs and All, and it went to number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart and all the way to number 2 on the R&B chart. Joe claimed that James stopped radio disc jockeys from playing the song, which prevented him from taking down James's Cold Sweat, which was number 1 on the R&B chart at the time. The song was number 1, and in the eyes of many fans, so was James Brown. In fact, he'd become known as Soul Brother Number 1, but Joe Tex refused to call him that and insisted that Little Willie John was the original Soul Brother Number 1. But in 1968, Joe would have the words "The New Soul Brother Number 1" painted on his tour bus, but he eventually removed it. Some say he took it off because of legal reasons, and some think it was out of respect for Little Willie John, who passed away in 1968. Regardless of the reason, Joe Tex would wind up challenging James Brown to a contest to determine who the real Soul Brother was, but James refused, saying in an interview, "I will not fight a black man. You need too much help." And Joe would say, quote, "James has no heart at all. He is very cold." As mentioned earlier, James avoided Joe following the incident at Club 15. Drummer Jimmi, who played behind James in 1969, said, quote, They were on the same show together when we were at Shea Stadium, and James wanted to go on first because he didn't want to be in the dressing room when Joe got there. Also during that year, Joe made sure he finished his shows with a small James Brown cape routine. Joe Tex moved on from the feud, but James Brown would mention him in his 1972 song, Funky Side of Town, which featured Bobby Bird and Hank Ballard. While naming different singers in the song, Hank Ballard said, "Now Joe Tex," to which James replied, "Who?" The rivalry between James Brown and Joe Tex was more than just a battle of egos. It was a reflection of the soul music scene itself, where innovation, passion, and showmanship reigned supreme. While their personal clashes became the stuff of legend, their music left an indelible mark on American culture. From the electrifying funk of James Brown, who would become known as the Godfather of Soul, to the smooth, heartfelt sound of Joe Tex, they pushed each other to new heights. In the end, it wasn't about who won or lost, but about how their music transcended the rivalry to inspire generations of artists that followed. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, and join us next time for Rick James vs. Prince.